The Trump administration has faced criticism for controversial immigration policies. But today, Acting Customs and Border Protection Commissioner Mark Morgan applauded the administration's approach, pointing to numbers that show apprehensions at the U.S. Mexico border continue to decline.
Through continued engagement with the government of Mexico and the Northern Triangle countries, we have initiated a network of initiatives, policies, and regulations to stem the flow of the migration. But I'm happy to report this month, the month of October, has continued with that trend, reaching a 14% decline compared to September, with just over 42,000 apprehensions, defying typical seasonal trends once again over the past 7 years. And this represents an overall decrease of almost 70% since the peak in May of this year. This is a significant decline.
CBS News immigration reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez joins me now from Washington. So, Camilo, what does the administration say led to this decline?
Yeah, Elaine, so for the first time in more than a year, the U.S. is apprehending fewer migrant children and families than adults along the U.S. Mexico border. This is a major demographic shift that the Trump administration attributes to quote-unquote consequences that they're applying to deter U.S.-bound migrants. September and October were the first months since August of 2018 when the U.S. apprehended more adults than children and families combined. And they believe that this consecutive decline in apprehension numbers is due to the pilot and experimental policies that they have implemented across the border in recent months. One of them is, of course, Elaine, the Remain in Mexico program, which has required more than 55,000 asylum seekers to wait in dangerous Mexican border cities for the duration of their immigration court proceedings. The other is the third country asylum ban, which renders most migrants who cross through Mexico to get to the U.S. ineligible for asylum. And they also have other policies like metering, which limits the number of asylum seekers who can claim fear of persecution at an official port of entry, so legally, each day. So there is a wide range of policy that the administration has implemented in recent months to curtail the number of asylum seekers. But, and I will stress this before, something that officials told us today is that they are still worried that courts can block some of these programs and that they will be stuck in the same situation as they were in spring if some unfavorable rulings are handed down.
Well, President Trump continues to call for a wall along the southern border as a key deterrent to keep migrants from coming into this country illegally. What did Morgan say about how far along the administration is on that front?
Right. So initially, Morgan said at the White House today that the administration has built about 70 miles of quote-unquote new wall along the U.S.-Mexico border, but he later conceded that those barriers are replacing old ones. But he did say that officials are breaking new ground in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas to build barriers where none existed before.
Well, we've also seen some shakeups in the leadership at the Department of Homeland Security. On Wednesday, Chad Wolf took over to head the department and replace Kevin McAleenan, who announced his resignation in October. Camilo, what can you tell us about Chad Wolf?
Yeah, so Elaine, Wolf's appointment finally allowed Kevin McAleenan to step down. He had resigned last month, but had to stay on the job for a couple of weeks because the administration struggled to find a replacement. He becomes the fifth official to lead the department during Mr. Trump's presidency, highlighting, Elaine, the unusual turnover at the department, which has now transformed into one of the main tools that the administration is using to push its hardline immigration agenda. So Chad Wolf joined the administration in its early days as a top aide to former Secretary of Homeland Security Kirstjen Nielsen. He kept a relatively low profile, but he was responsible for drafting some controversial policies, including the widely condemned practice of separating migrant children from their parents at the U.S.-Mexico border, along with the prolonged detention of asylum seekers. But I expect that he will still maintain a relatively low profile in the time that he will remain in this post.
Well, Ken Cuccinelli, who has been leading U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services since June, was named acting deputy secretary, the second highest ranking official at the Department of Homeland Security. What does this say about the immigration agenda moving forward?
Right. Although he was tapped for the second highest ranking position at the department, Elaine, this is arguably the most important announcement that we got yesterday. Cuccinelli has been a vocal defender of the president's crackdown on both illegal and legal immigration since he was tapped to lead U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services back in June. We can expect Cuccinelli to continue pushing the administration's controversial policies designed to deter both unauthorized migration at the border and also to severely restrict legal immigration. We can remember that Mr. Cuccinelli was the official who ordered the shuttering of a program that granted a temporary reprieve from deportation to children and other immigrants who had life-threatening conditions. This caused a massive uproar and prompted Kevin McAleenan, who was acting Homeland Security Secretary at the time, to overrule Cuccinelli and to require Cuccinelli to reinstate the program. So it's safe to say, Elaine, that the president will have an ardent backer at DHS now, with Cuccinelli in that top spot now.
Well, finally, the Trump administration released a proposal on Wednesday to restrict work permits for most asylum seekers who officials believe come to the country solely for economic reasons. Why are they doing this?
Well, the proposal will restrict, as you said, work permits for most asylum seekers, and it is really a move, and the officials conceded this earlier in the week, to deter U.S.-bound migrants whom they believe come to the country solely for economic reasons. So they don't believe these asylum seekers have legitimate asylum claims. Under the proposed rule, they would deny work authorizations to most migrants who cross the U.S. Mexico border without authorization, which is the largest group of asylum seekers in the U.S. And this is a move that experts tell me it's designed to deter Mexican asylum seekers, because Mexican asylum seekers, Elaine, cannot be placed in the Remain in Mexico program, and they cannot be subject to that third country transit ban that I mentioned earlier. So the administration has to find a way to deter this type of demographic of migrants.
All right, Camilo Montoya-Galvez in Washington for us. Camilo, thank you.
Thank you so much, Elaine.